But moving on to our final topic of the night, and that's the MLB game, MLB All-Star game, moving out of the state of Georgia due to the governor with the voting restriction laws and the new voting restriction laws. So this was in direct response to that. What do you think about that, Pat?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're starting to see, we've seen over the past year, especially, we've seen it before, but over the past year, especially with everything that's gone on in this country, that, athletes and sports teams and sports owners and sports leagues are now kind of saying, we have some power here, especially with the economy and the kind of influence we have on the local economy and the kind of influential power we can have now on politics. And the MLB, I think a lot of folks over the past year, especially, have kind of said, the MLB has, out of all the leagues, not really said enough. They haven't, with the pandemic, there was always, the league and the players kept kind of debating how they were going to handle last season and contracts. So Major League Baseball hasn't really had good PR over the last year or so. I don't think that's necessarily why they did this. I think it is good PR for them. But, they were saying, listen, we have power. If you're going to do this to people in Georgia, we're going to take the Major League All-Star game out of Georgia. And, some people called for the Masters to be taken away from Augusta this week. I think that's crazy. Not because the cause isn't good enough, but because, number one, this tournament's here every year at this specific course. You have to play it at Augusta. The other thing is the Masters has created a lot of revenue for Augusta, Georgia. Contrary to popular belief, Augusta, Georgia is not an affluent town. It's not. You see this beautiful course, but Augusta itself is not this. It's not like a bunch of ton of mansions. Yeah, a small town, not a lot of town revenue. So the Masters is huge for their local economy. So if they pulled the Masters out of there, especially not having it last April, that would really hurt that town. So I understand why they didn't pull out. They did make a nice statement today about it, which I thought was important. But yeah, the baseball is flexing its muscles, saying, we have a big voice here and we're going to use it. And baseball has a lot of international players who probably don't like what's going on either with the voting rights, and has seen people in Georgia, with voter suppression and everything like that, seen some of the folks that they know, have to deal with voter suppression. So I think that, Major League Baseball's probably heard from some players about this, but they also, to give them credit, I think where credit is due, but also they have some time. They have a few months before the All-Star game happens. So logistically, they can do this. Now, if this was 2 weeks before the All-Star game, I don't know if this would have happened. So I think timing is everything too, but I think this is the right move by Major League Baseball.
No, I definitely think it's the right move. I think it's definitely the right call. And I'm shocked. I didn't hear any calls for the Masters to be boycotted. So that's kind of new to me. But I 100% agree with you that the Masters is a totally different thing. It's not like we can go ahead and move Augusta to Coors Field in Colorado. You know what I mean? You just can't move that course. And it's a totally different thing. So I'm glad, just separate that entirely. Just separate that entirely. But the MLB All-Star game getting moved, I think, was definitely the right move by Major League Baseball. And like you said, it's them flexing their muscle and saying, hey, we generate a lot of revenue. We bring a lot of money into town. We can do this, right? We may not give you an All-Star game going forward, which is going to affect your bottom line, right? And I know a lot of people are saying, oh, this is cancel culture. No, it's not. This is called accountability and holding people accountable for their actions or their decisions. And so putting in a law that restricts voters, and people have said it specifically targets African-American voters and minorities and people of color. So going ahead and targeting the people that have been targeted the most over history, I'm glad that the MLB is taking a stance to say this is not right. We will not support it, and we're going to pull our dollars from your state, and we're going to pull our support from your state, and we're going to move it to Colorado. And so, cheers for Colorado, and Coors Field is now going to be the site of the game, I believe, right? So it's just going to be that it's one of those things where it's just accountability. So I think Governor Kemp, I believe his name is, or whatever it is, I think now he's just seeing that, hey, you're accountable for your actions as well. And I think a lot of other states, this is sending a message and setting the tone. The NBA could do this. The NFL could do this. The NHL could do this. Major League Soccer could do this. There's so many other things that can move out of your state or move this around. So I think states are going to have to think about these voting laws going forward, and if they're going to jump on board and try to do something like Georgia. And honestly, Georgia needs to rethink this because it's going to affect them for years. You think the MLB is just going to do this once as a statement? No. I doubt you're going to be seeing major events come back to Georgia anytime soon because of this new voter restriction law. And I think it's, like I said, I fully respect it, I fully understand it, and I fully support it. So I just think it's one of those things where I think Major League Baseball made the right decision in moving the game.
Right, and if you think Major League Baseball, made a big move by not having, this All-Star game, you thought it was easy for them, there's no way that the NBA will allow an All-Star game in Georgia if this law continues to be as constructed, because the NBA has been at the forefront of all this type of stuff, especially in the past year, but even in years past. There's no way they're going to allow an All-Star game. So you're not only getting baseball, you might be setting a precedent for the rest of the leagues to not have these events in Atlanta, in Georgia specifically. Now you wonder about the NCAA tournament. We just mentioned that the NCAA tournament might stick to one city from the Sweet 16 on, which is a huge 2-week, like you mentioned, almost like a 2-week convention down at this city, which is great for hotels and so forth. And now you're wondering if that's still going to happen because of what happened with this All-Star game, because of the voting laws. So I think that all needs to be considered. One thing I do want to bring up, and again, I support this, what Major League Baseball did. This does set a precedent, though, now where if you're having a big event in a state and the league in particular doesn't agree with a law or some kind of decision or some kind of political decision, is this going to set a precedent for this happening a lot now? I don't think it will, because it's logistically, that's just not, in the cards really. But now, leagues and tournaments and any kind of events can now look back and say, we're not going to have the NFL draft here because we don't like the law that was put forth in this state, or we're not going to have, the NCAA tournament here, or we're not going to have, the NHL All-Star game, and so forth. So you do wonder if this is going to set a precedent for future events and tournaments. So is that something that you think about, Brandon, when we talk about a situation like this?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, and I think you'll probably know the exacts on it. I think just even a couple of years ago, with that transgender law, was it North Carolina? And they moved they moved something out of North Carolina in response to that. So I think this is kind of something similar.
No, that's true. That's true. I didn't even think of that. I think, was that the NBA All-Star game maybe?
I think so.
I think they
out of
moved
Charlotte,
it,
right?
I think it was about a year away. They moved it to Vegas, I think, if I remember correctly, because of that. So, yeah, no, that's a good point. And, we haven't seen it. This is the first time since then that we've seen it. So, it'll probably happen again, but it's not going to be as frequent that, we all think. But it's very interesting. And some people have also said, like, can't we just play sports and not have to, and some of that I get, because with everything that's going on, people just want to watch sports. And because that's their outlet. I'm sure it is for you and I too. Like, sports is our couple hours away from all the stresses of our lives. We just watch sports, and now the stresses are intersecting with sports. But at the same time, sports is so big now, professional sports, and is so much tied to the economy, and these athletes are so well educated and they're so involved now that it's going to intersect. That's just how it is now. So it's not going to change. That's not going to change. It's only going to even become more so. So you have to get used to it and catch up with the times, or just ignore it and watch the game and not think about everything that's going on with the game. So it's going to be very interesting over the next few weeks. And like I mentioned, April's probably the best sports month of the year, I think, and we have a lot more to talk about over the next few weeks of this month. So, folks, that's going to do it for Comeback Sports this week in the first week of April. Once again, if you want to follow Coach Perry and myself on Twitter, make sure you take a look at those Twitter handles at the bottom of the screen. Also, make sure you subscribe to Comeback Sports on YouTube. The more subscribers, the better for us. And also, if you make a comment, leave a comment in our subscription or our YouTube chat and say which number subscriber you are. If you're number 35 or 45 or whatever it is, we'll make sure that we mention you in our next show if we see that in the chat. So make sure you do that if you want to be mentioned in our next Comeback Sports show. I'm Pat Flaherty. For my partner, Brandon Perry, thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time on Comeback Sports. Have a good week, everybody.